Welcome, dear viewers. For more exclusive, thrilling stories every week, join our membership. Sit back, relax, and sip your coffee. Enjoy. Every arcade game tells a story, but the machines at Retro Realm in downtown Tampa tell stories that haven't happened yet. I've watched Pac-Man mazes shift into blueprints of local buildings, and Street Fighter characters throw punches, but somehow leave bruises on my arms the next morning. My name's Diego Vasquez, and I never planned on staying in Tampa this long. 3 months ago, I was just passing through on my way to Miami, sleeping in my beat-up Corolla outside the 7-Eleven on Kennedy Boulevard. The plan was simple: sell my grandmother's ring, get enough cash for an apartment deposit, and start fresh somewhere nobody knew about the mess I'd left behind in Jacksonville. That ring had been my abuela's pride, a delicate band with 3 small emeralds that caught light like trapped fireflies. She'd worn it every day until arthritis made her fingers too swollen, then pressed it into my palm during her final week at Tampa General Hospital. "Mijo," she'd whispered, "this will bring you luck when you need it most." I needed luck desperately. My ex-girlfriend had cleaned out our joint account, my landlord had changed the locks, and my boss at the auto shop had fired me for missing too many shifts while caring for Abuela. 26 years old and camping in a parking lot, not exactly the success story my family had imagined when I graduated from Hillsborough High. The pawn shops along Florida Avenue offered insulting amounts for the ring: $40, $60 if I was lucky. But rent deposits in Miami started at $800, and my savings account showed a laughable $127.43. I was about to accept $50 from some guy in Ybor City when I spotted the Help Wanted sign taped to the window of Retro Realm. The arcade sat wedged between a Cuban sandwich shop and a laundromat on Franklin Street, its neon sign flickering pink and blue against the afternoon heat. Through the tinted windows, I could see rows of vintage cabinets: Galaga, Donkey Kong, Centipede, their screens glowing like rectangular campfires in the dim interior. The owner, a wiry man named Esteban Morales with graying temples and coffee-stained teeth, hired me on the spot. "Night shift," he'd said, counting 20s into my palm. 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., Monday through Thursday. Keep the place clean, help any late-night customers, and follow the rules I give you. Do that, and you'll make enough to rent something decent in Seminole Heights. The pay was better than anything else I'd found. $12 an hour plus tips from the regulars. Enough to keep the ring, and maybe even save some money. What Esteban didn't mention during that first conversation was that Retro Realm attracted a very specific type of customer after midnight, and that the games themselves seemed to remember things that hadn't happened yet. I should have asked more questions. Should have wondered why someone would pay that much for such a simple job. Should have noticed how Esteban's hands shook slightly when he handed me the key ring, or how he avoided looking directly at the machines while we talked. But I needed the work, and the ring stayed safely tucked in my pocket where it belonged. My first night at Retro Realm started like any other minimum wage job, with a clipboard of instructions and the lingering smell of industrial cleaning solution. Esteban met me at the front door at 10:45 p.m., keys jangling as he unlocked the deadbolt. The arcade felt different at night. During my brief afternoon visit, sunlight had filtered through the windows, making the place seem almost cheerful. Now, with only the glow from the game screens and a few overhead fixtures, shadows pooled between the machines, like spilled ink. "Coffee makers in the back office," Esteban said, leading me past rows of cabinets. "Break room has a microwave and mini fridge. Help yourself to whatever's in there. Energy drinks, leftover pizza from day shift." His accent carried hints of his childhood in Hialeah. Vowels stretched in that particular South Florida way. The games hummed quietly around us. Pac-Man's attract mode played its familiar tune, while Miss Pac-Man cycled through her demo screens. A Galaga machine near the back corner made soft beeping sounds, as if calling for attention. Most customers clear out by midnight, Esteban continued, stopping at a desk near the entrance. But we get some regulars who like the quiet hours. Night shift types, nurses from Tampa General, security guards, folks getting off late from the restaurants on West Shore. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. These are the rules. Read them tonight. Memorize them by tomorrow. Non-negotiable. The paper felt oddly warm against my fingers. 7 rules, typed in clean block letters. Retro Realm night shift rules. Never turn off the Galaga machine in the back corner. If it stops working, call me immediately. Do not attempt repairs. If someone asks to play the Polybius cabinet, tell them it's out of order. Do not let anyone near that machine after 2 a.m. The Street Fighter II cabinet sometimes shows matches that haven't happened yet. Do not watch these games. Close your eyes and count to 30. If you hear children laughing, check all doors and windows. Make sure they're locked. The laughter should stop within 5 minutes. Clean the Pac-Man machine every 2 hours. Use only the special cleaning solution in the red bottle. Wear gloves. Never accept tips from customers wearing red clothing. Politely decline and offer them a free game instead. If the power goes out, leave immediately. Lock the door behind you and call me from your car. I read through the list twice, waiting for Esteban to laugh or explain the joke. He didn't. Questions? He asked, checking his watch. These are serious? Dead serious. His expression hardened. Diego, this job pays well because it requires following directions exactly. No creativity, no shortcuts. Just do what the list says. I folded the paper and tucked it into my jeans pocket. What's Polybius? Back corner, covered with a tarp. Don't worry about it. Esteban gathered his jacket and headed for the door. Lock up behind me. First customer usually shows up around midnight. The deadbolt clicked into place, leaving me alone with 37 arcade machines and a growing sense that I'd accepted more than just a night shift position. I spent the first hour exploring. The arcade stretched deeper than it appeared from the street, with machines arranged in rough rows that created natural walkways. Classic games dominated the front section: Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Frogger, while newer fighting games occupied the middle area. Racing simulators and pinball machines lined the walls. The Galaga machine Esteban had mentioned sat in the far back corner, its screen cycling through attract mode demos. Nothing special about it, just another early 80s cabinet with worn buttons and a slightly tilted monitor. But when I walked past, the machine's cooling fan seemed to spin faster, as if responding to my presence. The covered cabinet nearby had to be Polybius. The tarp was black vinyl, secured with bungee cords. I could make out the basic shape underneath, a standard upright arcade cabinet, probably from the same era as Galaga. Part of me wanted to peek beneath the covering, but Esteban's tone when discussing rules had been absolutely clear. At 11:47 p.m., my first customer arrived. She was maybe 50, wearing blue scrubs with Tampa General embroidered on the chest pocket. Her name tag read, Luz. She nodded politely as she entered, heading straight for the centipede machine without hesitation. Rough shift? I asked, making conversation. I see you, she replied, feeding quarters into the slot. Sometimes you need to shoot something, you know. I understood completely. Luz played for 20 minutes, working through several games with the focused concentration of someone trying to clear their mind. When she finished, she dropped a $5 tip into the jar by the register. Thanks for keeping this place open late, she said. Not many quiet spots to decompress after midnight. After she left, I checked the rules again. Nothing about ICU nurses or centipede. So far, so good. The next customer showed up just after 1 a.m., a security guard from one of the office buildings downtown. He played Street Fighter 2 for an hour, occasionally muttering in Spanish when he lost a match. Normal stuff. At 2:15 a.m., everything changed. I was wiping down the Pac-Man machine with a special cleaning solution, which smelled like vinegar mixed with something I couldn't identify, when the Street Fighter cabinet caught my attention. The screen showed a match in progress, but both players had left 20 minutes earlier. Ryu was fighting Chiming on the airport stage. Nothing strange about that, except I recognized the fighting style. The Ryu player was using the exact combination moves that my cousin Carlos favored, down to the specific timing of his dragon punches. Carlos lived in Orlando. He'd never been to this arcade. As I watched, Ryu landed a perfect combo that Carlos had shown me just last weekend during a family barbecue. The same sequence, the same rhythm, even the same small pause before the final uppercut. I remembered rule number 3 just as the match ended, but by then I'd already seen the victory screen display tomorrow's date. I stared at the Street Fighter screen until the attract mode kicked in, erasing any evidence of what I'd witnessed. Tomorrow's date. Carlos's fighting patterns. My hands felt clammy as I reached for my phone to call my cousin, then stopped. What would I say? Hey, weird question. Are you planning to visit a Tampa arcade tomorrow night? The cleaning solution bottle sat heavy in my other hand. Rule 5 said to clean Pac-Man every 2 hours, and I'd been mid-task when the Street Fighter incident happened. Focus on the job, I told myself. Follow the rules. Everything else could wait until morning. The special cleaning solution worked differently than normal arcade cleaners. Instead of simply removing fingerprints and grime, it seemed to make the screen surface shimmer slightly, like oil on water. The joystick and buttons required extra attention. Each one needed 30 seconds of scrubbing with the red cloth Esteban had provided. As I worked, the Pac-Man machine's demo mode cycled through its usual pattern. Pac-Man navigating the maze, eating dots, avoiding ghosts. Standard stuff, except tonight the maze layout looked familiar. Too familiar. The pattern matched the hallway configuration at my old apartment complex in Jacksonville. The exact same T-shaped corridors. The same dead-end sections where the laundry room and mailboxes had been located. Even the power pellet positions corresponded to where the building's exit signs had home. I finished cleaning and stepped back, waiting for the attract mode to reset. When it did, the maze had returned to normal. Classic Pac-Man layout. Nothing unusual. My phone buzzed. Text message from Carlos. Primo, you still in Tampa? Thinking about driving down tomorrow night to check out that arcade you mentioned. Need to blow off some steam after work. I hadn't mentioned any arcade to Carlos. We'd talked at the barbecue last weekend, sure, but our conversation had focused on his new job at the theme park in Orlando. Nothing about arcades or Tampa. The next customer arrived before I could process this further. A young woman in a Bucks jersey, probably mid-20s, with tired eyes and paint-stained fingers. She headed straight for the pinball machines, feeding quarters into medieval madness. You an artist? I asked, nodding toward her hands. Tattoo artist, she replied, launching the first ball. Shop downtown stays open until 2 a.m. on weekends. Sometimes I need to decompress before heading home. Her name was Carmen, and she'd been coming to Retro Realm for 6 months. Best place in Tampa for late-night gaming, she said, working the flippers with practiced skill. Esteban keeps good machines, and the vibe is chill. None of that loud music and neon nonsense like the places on Bale Mabry. While Carmen played, I noticed the Galaga machine's activity had increased. The attract mode demos ran faster than normal, and occasionally the screen would flicker, not like a technical problem, more like someone rapidly changing channels on an old television. At 3:17 a.m., Carmen finished her games and headed for the door. As she passed the Street Fighter cabinet, she paused. "That machine's been acting weird lately," she said. "Sometimes shows matches that look real, like security camera footage instead of game graphics. Esteban says it's just a display glitch." After she left, I pulled out the rules list and read number 3 again. The Street Fighter 2 cabinet sometimes shows matches that haven't happened yet. Do not watch these games. Close your eyes and count to 30. Not games that look real, games that haven't happened yet. I was still processing this when the laughter started. Children's laughter, high and musical, echoing from somewhere near the back of the arcade. Rule 4 kicked in automatically. Check all doors and windows. Make sure they're locked. The front door was secure. I'd locked it behind Carmen. The emergency exit in the back showed no signs of tampering. Deadbolt engaged, alarm system armed. The laughter continued, seeming to bounce between the machines like an audio ping-pong ball. One moment it came from near the racing games, the next from the fighting game section. I followed the sound, checking windows as I went. All secure. 5 minutes felt like 20, but eventually the laughter faded to silence. According to the rules, this was normal. Expected even. But my racing pulse suggested otherwise. The Galaga machine had stopped its attract mode completely. The screen showed a blank blue field, with a small white ship at the bottom. Player 1's starting position. But no one had inserted quarters or pressed the start button. I approached carefully, remembering Rule 1, never turn off this machine. Call Esteban if it stops working. But it wasn't broken. It was waiting. The screen displayed Ready Player 1 in yellow letters. As I watched, the ship began moving on its own. Not the random movements of attract mode, but purposeful navigation. The formation of enemy ships descended in precise patterns, while the player ship dodged and fired with superhuman accuracy. The score climbed rapidly. 10,000, 25,000, 50,000. Then the screen went black for 3 seconds before resuming normal attract mode. My phone rang, making me jump. Esteban's name on the caller ID. "Diego? Everything okay there?" I got an alert on my phone. Alert? Security system flagged unusual activity around 3:20. Doors opening and closing, that sort of thing. I glanced at the time, 3:43 a.m. I checked all the doors during the laughter. Everything was locked. Good. The laughter happened. His casual tone bothered me. You knew it would. Monday nights, usually around 3:15. You followed Rule 4. Yeah, but then you're fine. Get some rest when you can. Tuesday nights are busier. He hung up before I could ask about the Galaga machine or the Street Fighter predictions. The rest of my shift passed quietly. 2 more customers, a nurse from St. Joseph's Hospital and a guy who worked overnight stocking at the Walmart on Hillsborough Avenue. Both played their games and left without incident. At 6:30 a.m., I started the closing routine. Wipe down surfaces, empty the cash register, set the alarm system. The morning sun painted orange stripes through the windows, making the arcade feel almost normal again. Almost. As I gathered my jacket and keys, the covered cabinet in the back corner caught my attention. The black tarp had shifted slightly, as if something underneath had moved. One corner had come loose from its bungee cord, revealing a small section of the cabinet's side panel. I could see part of a logo, stylized letters in silver on black. Polly was visible before the tarp concealed the rest. Polybius, the game I wasn't supposed to let anyone near after 2 a.m. The parking lot felt like a refuge after 8 hours inside Retro Realm. My Corolla started on the second try, and I drove home to my efficiency apartment in Seminole Heights with the radio playing loud enough to drown out my thoughts. But as I pulled into my parking space, I noticed something that made my stomach clench. Fresh tire tracks in the gravel beside my building, tracks that hadn't been there when I'd left for work. Someone had been here while I was at the arcade, someone who knew where I lived. I checked my phone for the third time that morning. Carlos's text about visiting the arcade tomorrow night. Except tomorrow was today now, and I had no idea what would happen when my cousin walked into Retro Realm expecting to play Street Fighter 2. The game that showed matches before they happened. The game I wasn't supposed to watch. I spent Tuesday afternoon trying to convince myself that Monday night had been a series of coincidences. The Street Fighter machine showing tomorrow's date? Probably just a display glitch combined with my imagination. Carlos texting about visiting? We'd talked about arcades before. Maybe I'd forgotten mentioning Retro Realm. The tire tracks outside my apartment building. Plenty of people visited this complex. But when I arrived for my second shift at 10:45 p.m., Esteban was waiting with a different expression. Less casual boss, more concerned father figure. "Diego, we need to talk." He unlocked the front door and led me inside. How did Monday night feel? Really? Weird but manageable. The rules worked. Good. He paused near the Street Fighter cabinet, studying its dark screen. Tonight might be more intense. Tuesday nights usually are. The machines get active when they know someone's coming. Someone specific. Your cousin Carlos. He'll arrive around 11:30. When he does, you need to follow the rules exactly. No exceptions, no curiosity. My stomach dropped. How do you know about Carlos? The same way the Street Fighter machine knew yesterday. Esteban pulled out his keys, then stopped. "Diego, this job isn't just about keeping the arcade cream. These machines don't just play games. They show possibilities. Potential futures. Past events that left echoes. Your cousin is connected to something that's going to happen here. Connected how? That's what we need to find out. But safely." He handed me the keys and headed for the door. Remember Rule 3. When the machine shows Carlos's match, don't watch. The images can change what happens. After he left, I spent 20 minutes checking every machine, every corner, every shadow. The arcade felt different tonight. Charged, like the air before a thunderstorm. The games hummed with extra energy, their attract modes cycling faster than normal. At 11:15 p.m., my first customer arrived. An older man wearing a security uniform from one of the downtown hotels. He nodded politely and headed straight for Galaga. Not the one in the back corner, but a second Galaga machine near the front. While he played, I prepared for Carlos's arrival. The cleaning supplies were ready, the cash register was stopped, and I'd memorized the rules list one more time. Everything felt as normal as it could, in a place where normal didn't apply. Carlos showed up at 11:27 p.m., 3 minutes ahead of Esteban's prediction. "Primo." He grinned as he entered, looking around the arcade with genuine appreciation. This place is perfect. Very retro, very chill. He wore his usual outfit, jeans, a Universal Studios t-shirt, and the red baseball cap he'd gotten during employee orientation. Red clothing. Rule 6. Never accept tips from customers wearing red clothing. "Good to see you, man." I forced a smile while my brain scrambled. "What brings you down from Orlando?" "Needed a change of scenery. Theme park drama, you know. My supervisor's been riding everyone lately." Carlos pulled out a $20 bill. "Break this into quarters for me, and keep a couple bucks for yourself." "Actually, the change machine works fine. I pointed toward the wall-mounted unit. But hey, since you drove all this way, first game's on the house. Carlos raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. He fed the 20 into the change machine and pocketed the quarters. Where should I start? I'm feeling like some street fighter. My pulse spiked. That machine's been having issues, display problems. Maybe try something else. No, I brought my A game tonight. Need to practice my Ryu combos. I watched helplessly as Carlos approached the Street Fighter II cabinet. The screen flickered to life as he inserted quarters, displaying the character selection screen. He chose Ryu, just as I'd seen in yesterday's preview. The computer opponent selection screen appeared. Instead of random selection, the cursor moved directly to Chun-Li. Carlos didn't seem to notice that he hadn't touched the controls. Weird. It picked for me, he muttered, hitting the start button. The match began on the airport stage, exactly as I'd witnessed the night before. I pulled out my phone and set a timer for 30 seconds, then closed my eyes and started counting. The sounds of combat filled the arcade, punches connecting, special move sound effects, the crowd cheering from the game's audio track. At 15 seconds, the security guard near the front called out, "Hey, your cousin's really good at this game." "Don't look. Keep counting." 20 seconds. Carlos shouted in excitement, "Yes, perfect combo." 25 seconds. The match sounds intensified, but underneath them I heard something else. A low humming that seemed to come from multiple machines at once, harmonizing in a frequency that made my teeth ache. 30 seconds. I opened my eyes. Carlos was staring at the screen with a confused expression. The victory screen showed Ryu as the winner, exactly as predicted, but Carlos wasn't celebrating. "That was strange," he said. "I swear I was losing for most of that match, but somehow I pulled off moves I've never done before, like my hands knew what to do without me thinking about it." The security guard finished his game and approached us. "Your cousin fights like a pro. Those combinations were textbook perfect." Carlos looked at his hands, flexing his fingers. I felt like I was watching someone else play, while my body did the work. Muscle memory from moves I don't remember learning. The humming sound had stopped, but now the Galaga machine in the back corner was showing activity. The attract mode had frozen on a single screen. A formation of enemy ships arranged in a pattern that looked distinctly like the layout of the Universal Studios parking lot where Carlos worked. "I'm going to try another game," Carlos said, but he didn't move toward any other machines. Instead, he stood transfixed by the Street Fighter screen, which was now showing the character selection screen for player 2. "Who's going to be my opponent?" he asked. I realized with growing horror that no one else was near the machine. The screen was waiting for a second player that didn't exist. "Carlos, maybe we should..." The screen flickered and automatically selected Chun-Li again. A new match started, but this time Carlos wasn't controlling Ryu. His character stood motionless, while Chun-Li began a series of perfect attacks. "I'm not doing anything," Carlos said, stepping back from the controls. "The joystick isn't responding." On screen, Ryu suddenly burst into motion, executing a flawless defensive pattern that Carlos had never demonstrated before. The match played out like a choreographed dance. Two fighters moving with superhuman precision, each attack perfectly timed, each counterattack flowing seamlessly into the next combination. Carlos wasn't touching the controls at all. The security guard had moved closer, watching the match with increasing fascination. "How are they doing that? It's like watching a movie instead of a game." The match ended with both characters performing simultaneous finishing moves that shouldn't have been possible within the game's programming. The screen displayed "double perfect" in letters that pulsed with an otherworldly glow. Then the arcade lights began to flicker. Not the random electrical problems you'd expect in an older building, but a rhythmic pulsing that matched the tempo of the Street Fighter match we'd just witnessed. Every machine screen dimmed and brightened in perfect synchronization. "We should probably leave," I said, remembering Rule 7 about power problems. But the lights weren't going out completely. They were just breathing, like the entire arcade had developed a heartbeat. Carlos stood frozen in front of the Street Fighter machine, his face pale and confused. "Diego, I think something's wrong with me. My hands are tingling, and I keep seeing flashes of fight scenes that I know I never played." The security guard backed toward the exit. "I'm going to head out. This place is getting too weird for me." After he left, Carlos and I were alone with 37 machines that seemed to pulse with shared consciousness. The Galaga cabinet in the back corner had started playing by itself again, but this time, the ship's movements traced out letters. CARLOS. "What is this place?" Carlos whispered. Before I could answer, the covered cabinet in the back corner began to emit a low electronic whine. The black tarp shifted and stretched, as if something underneath was expanding. The sound grew louder, joined by harmonics from other machines throughout the arcade. But this wasn't the pleasant humming from earlier. This was discord, interference, the sound of systems struggling against each other. Carlos grabbed my arm. "We need to get out of here now." But when we turned toward the front door, we found our path blocked by a new problem. The Pac-Man machine was displaying a maze I recognized, the exact layout of the arcade itself, complete with our current positions shown as 2 yellow dots near the exit. And there were ghosts in the maze. 4 of them, moving toward our position with perfect predatory coordination. "The back exit," I said, pulling Carlos toward the rear of the building. As we ran past the covered cabinet, a corner of the tarp fell away completely. I caught a glimpse of the machine underneath. Sleek black cabinet with silver letters spelling Polybius across the marquee. The screen showed swirling patterns that seemed to move independently of any programming, colors that shouldn't have been possible on 1980s display technology. We reached the back door just as every machine in the arcade activated simultaneously. Attract modes replaced by active gameplay, scores climbing rapidly, sound effects overlapping into a cacophony of electronic chaos. I fumbled with the deadbolt while Carlos watched the machines with growing terror. "They're all playing themselves," he said. "Every single game." The door opened, and we stumbled into the alley behind the arcade. The cool night air felt like salvation after the electric intensity inside. But as we caught our breath, I realized that Carlos was still staring at his hands. "I can feel them," he whispered. "The combinations, the moves, they're stuck in my head like songs I can't stop humming." And when he looked up at me, his eyes reflected the neon glow from the arcade sign in a way that seemed distinctly wrong, like looking at a screen instead of a person. We sat in my Corolla in the parking lot behind a 24-hour Dunkin' Donuts on Kennedy Boulevard. Engine running, air conditioning fighting the humid night air. Carlos hadn't spoken since we'd left the arcade 20 minutes ago, but his hands kept moving, fingers twitching through complex patterns like he was playing an invisible joystick. "Talk to me," I said. "How do you feel?" Like I downloaded someone else's muscle memory. Carlos flexed his fingers, staring at them with disturbing fascination. "I keep seeing combos I never learned. Perfect frame timing for moves I've only watched in tournament videos. But you feel okay otherwise? No pain? No dizziness?" "I feel enhanced, like my reflexes got upgraded." He demonstrated by catching a quarter I flipped at him without looking away from his hands. That should worry me more than it does. My phone buzzed. Text from Esteban. "Where are you?" Arcade alarm shows back door opened, but no emergency call. I need to call my boss, I told Carlos. Stay here. Try not to think about fighting games. I stepped outside the car and dialed Esteban's number. He answered before the first ring. Diego! What happened? The machines went crazy. All of them started playing by themselves. Carlos was connected somehow to the Street Fighter cabinet. We had to leave through the back. Is he hurt? Not hurt exactly. Changed. He can do fighting moves he never learned, and his reflexes are faster than normal. Silence on the other end then. Where are you now? Dunkin' Donuts on Kennedy. What is that place, Esteban? What are those machines really doing? Meet me at my apartment in Westchase, 4247 Gun Highway, Building C, Unit 23. Don't go back to the arcade tonight, and don't let Carlos play any video games. Understand? Why can't he? Just don't. I'll explain everything when you get here. The drive to Westchase took 30 minutes through Tampa's late-night traffic. Carlos spent the entire trip practicing phantom joystick movements, his hands dancing through combinations with eerie precision. You're freaking me out, I said as we pulled into Esteban's apartment complex. Sorry. It's like having a song stuck in your head, except the song is every Street Fighter combo ever discovered. Esteban's apartment building was typical Central Florida architecture, beige stucco with fake tile roofs, surrounded by palm trees and carefully maintained landscaping. Unit 23 was on the ground floor, and Esteban answered the door before we could knock. Inside, quickly. His living room was dominated by arcade cabinets, 6 of them, arranged in a semicircle around a central area with 2 folding chairs. But these weren't normal arcade games. The screens showed diagnostic readouts, scrolling data, and complex waveform patterns that looked more like medical equipment than entertainment. Sit down, both of you. Esteban moved to one of the machines and began typing on a keyboard I hadn't noticed. Carlos, I need you to put your hands on these sensors. 2 metal plates extended from the machine's base. Carlos hesitated, then placed his palms on the sensors. The screens immediately filled with activity, brainwave patterns, neurological mapping, data streams I couldn't interpret. As I suspected, Esteban muttered, Diego, your cousin has been imprinted. Imprinted with what? Muscle memory, reflexes, and combat instincts from approximately 47 different Street Fighter players. The machine absorbed their skills during gameplay over the past 6 months and transferred them to Carlos tonight. Carlos stared at the readouts. You mean I have other people's abilities in my head? More than that. You have their dedication, their practice hours, their competitive drive. The machine collected these experiences like a database and merged them with your existing neural pathways. I felt sick. That's why you have those rules. The machines aren't just games. They're harvesting something from the players. Not harvesting. Recording. Every game played leaves traces. Muscle memory, decision patterns, emotional responses. Most people never notice because the imprinting is gradual, subtle. But Carlos experienced 6 months of accumulated data in a single session. Why him specifically? Esteban adjusted controls on another machine. Because he's related to you, and you're the night shift operator. The arcade has been studying your family connection since you started working. Carlos was the perfect test subject, skilled enough to handle the data transfer, connected enough to you that his presence would activate the deeper systems. Carlos removed his hands from the sensors. So what happens to me now? Do I keep these abilities forever? That depends on whether you're willing to become part of the collection. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. What do you mean, collection? I asked. Esteban sighed and sat down across from us. The Retro Realm Arcade is a research facility, has been since 1987. The games are modified to record and transfer human skills, memories, and instincts. We've been building a database of human capabilities for nearly 4 decades. Research for who? Originally the military. They wanted to understand how expertise develops, how to accelerate training, how to transfer skills between personnel. But the project evolved beyond its original scope. Carlos stood up, pacing to one of the diagnostic machines. You're talking about mind control. No skill transfer. Imagine being able to download a surgeon's steady hands, a pilot's spatial awareness, a musician's timing. The applications are limitless. But the rules, I said. The supernatural stuff. Children laughing. Machines playing themselves. Side effects. When you record human consciousness, you inevitably capture more than intended. Emotions, fears, memories that don't belong to the original player. The arcade has become saturated with decades of human experiences. Carlos had wandered to a machine that was displaying video footage. Is this from the arcade? We looked at the screen. Security camera feeds showed the inside of Retro Realm. Every cabinet was active, playing games with invisible players. The Street Fighter machine was cycling through matches at superhuman speed, characters moving with perfect precision. They're practicing, Esteban explained, processing tonight's data collection, integrating Carlos's natural reflexes with the existing database. And the Polybius machine? Central processing unit. It coordinates the data transfer between all the other cabinets. That's why no one can play it after 2 a.m. That's when the main processing cycle begins. Carlos turned away from the screen. I want these abilities out of my head. That's not possible. The neural pathways have already been altered. But we can offer you something else, a partnership. Help us understand what happened to you, and we'll teach you to control the new abilities. Or you'll spend the rest of your life with 47 people's muscle memories competing for control of your body. Eventually, your original personality will be overwhelmed. I stood up, anger replacing fear. You used us. You used me to get to Carlos. You needed a job, and we needed a night shift operator. The arrangement benefited everyone. Everyone except the people whose skills you're stealing. We're not stealing anything. We're preserving human capabilities. Every skill, every instinct, every moment of expertise, saved for future generations. Carlos had been quiet during our argument, but now he spoke with a voice that sounded subtly different. How many people have you done this to? Counting you? 237 successful transfers over 4 decades? And how many of them are still themselves? Esteban's silence was answer enough. I grabbed Carlos's arm. We're leaving, now. But Carlos pulled away, and when he looked at me, his expression was calm in a way that didn't match the situation. Actually, I think I want to hear more about this partnership. Carlos, these people used you as a test subject. They gave me abilities I never could have developed on my own. Do you know how long it takes to master the techniques I can now perform instinctively? His voice carried a confidence that hadn't been there an hour ago. More than confidence. Authority. Like he'd aged years in the space of our conversation. This isn't you talking, I said. It's all of us talking, Carlos replied, and for just a moment, his voice carried harmonics that sounded like multiple people speaking in unison. Esteban smiled. The integration is proceeding faster than expected. Carlos, would you like to see what other abilities we can unlock? Carlos, we're leaving, right now. I stepped toward my cousin, but he held up a hand that stopped me mid-stride. Actually, Diego, I think you should stay too. His voice carried undertones I'd never heard before. Confident, calculating, older. Esteban was just explaining how the process works. It's fascinating. The process of stealing people's minds. Optimizing human potential. Carlos moved to another diagnostic machine, his movements fluid and precise, in a way that reminded me of professional athletes. Do you realize how much human expertise is lost every generation? Master craftsmen who die without passing on their skills, athletes whose abilities vanish when they retire, soldiers whose combat instincts are buried with them. This wasn't my cousin talking. Carlos had always been enthusiastic about his hobbies, but he'd never spoken with this kind of philosophical detachment about human potential and legacy. Esteban activated another screen, showing a map of Florida dotted with red markers. We have facilities in 17 cities now. Tampa was just the beginning. 17? The scope hit me like a physical blow. How many people have you processed? Thousands. The project has been incredibly successful. He zoomed in on the Tampa marker, revealing smaller dots throughout the city. Retro Realm is our primary collection site, but we have supplementary locations at the Dave & Buster's in Brandon, the arcade at Busch Gardens, even a few machines at the University Student Center. Carlos studied the map with interest that felt alien and wrong. What other skills have you collected besides gaming abilities? Medical procedures from surgeons who play during their breaks, mechanical expertise from auto technicians, mathematical insights from engineers. The arcade format is perfect because it attracts people in their downtime, when their minds are relaxed and receptive. I backed toward the door, but Carlos moved to block my path. His reflexes were faster than humanly possible. He was there before I'd even completed the motion. "You're not leaving," he said, and his smile looked practiced, like someone trying to remember how emotions worked. "This isn't you, Carlos. Fight it." "This is me optimized, enhanced. Why would I fight improvement?" He tilted his head at an angle that seemed slightly wrong, like he was calculating something. "Besides, Diego, you're part of this too. Your work at the arcade has been incredibly valuable." Esteban pulled up another screen showing security footage from Retro Realm. "Every customer interaction, every rule you followed, every supernatural encounter. We've been recording your responses, your ability to remain calm under pressure, to follow instructions precisely despite fear, to maintain function while witnessing impossible events. These are rare psychological traits." The footage showed me cleaning the Pac-Man machine, checking doors during the children's laughter, carefully avoiding watching the Street Fighter predictions. All of it monitored, analyzed, recorded. "You've been conditioning me," I realized. "Training you." The night shift rules aren't just safety measures, they're psychological exercises. We needed to understand how ordinary people adapt to extraordinary circumstances. Carlos moved to a control panel and began typing with speed and accuracy that suggested computer programming expertise he'd never possessed. The data indicates Diego would make an excellent subject for stress response integration. We could transfer him to collected experiences of emergency room nurses, combat medics, disaster response coordinators. No, I tried to push past Carlos, but he caught my wrist with a grip that felt like steel cables. His strength had increased dramatically. "The process is quick," Esteban assured me, "and the abilities you'd gain are remarkable. Imagine being able to remain calm in any crisis, to make perfect decisions under pressure, to save lives with skills you could never learn naturally. By destroying who I am, by completing who you are." Carlos's grip tightened. "Diego, look at what I can do now." He released my wrist and moved to an empty space in the center of the room. What followed was a demonstration that defied human limits. Martial arts forms that blended multiple fighting styles, movements that flowed between combat techniques with balletic grace, defensive patterns that suggested he could react to attacks before they were thrown. 47 different masters, he said, not even breathing hard. Their decades of training available instantly. Their muscle memory, their instincts, their understanding of combat timing and distance. Their personalities, I added. How much of you is left in there? Carlos paused mid-form, and for a moment his expression flickered. Sometimes I remember being smaller, weaker, uncertain about things. But those memories feel like childhood, like stages I've grown beyond. Those memories are from last week. Are they? He looked genuinely confused. Time feels different now. Linear progression seems less important when you have access to accumulated expertise. Esteban was preparing another machine, one with a chair that looked distinctly medical. Restraints hung from the armrests. Diego, if you'll just sit here, we can begin your integration process. Carlos can help you through the transition. Help me become someone else, you mean? Help you become yourself plus others, Carlos corrected. The core personality remains, but enhanced with additional capabilities. I noticed something that gave me hope. Carlos's confusion about time and memory suggested the integration wasn't complete. Maybe some part of my real cousin was still fighting the collective consciousness. Carlos, remember when we were kids and you got lost at Busch Gardens? You were 7, I was 9. You were crying because you thought you'd never see your mom again. I remember being afraid, he said slowly, but fear seems inefficient now, a waste of processing power. You weren't processing anything. You were just a scared kid who wanted his family. That version of me was limited by inexperience and emotional instability. But his voice wavered slightly, and I saw his original personality struggling against the imposed enhancements. What about when your dad taught you to drive stick shift in the Publix parking lot on Dale Mabry? You stalled the engine 12 times and he never got mad, just kept encouraging you. Carlos's hands moved unconsciously, as if gripping a clutch and shifter. Dad was patient. He said everyone learns at their own pace. His voice softened. He said the important thing was not giving up. That's who you are, Carlos. Someone who doesn't give up, who learns from mistakes, who cares about family. Esteban stepped forward. Diego, you're interfering with the integration process. Carlos needs to accept his enhancement fully. I'm reminding him who he really is. He's becoming something better than he was. He's becoming a tool for your research project. Carlos looked between us, and I could see the battle playing out in his expression. Multiple personalities competing for control, fighting over memories and priorities and fundamental identity. I feel like I'm forgetting something important, he said, but I can't remember what I'm forgetting. You're forgetting yourself, I said. The person who drove 3 hours to visit his cousin at a crappy arcade job. The person who texted me yesterday about needing to blow off steam after work problems. Work problems? Carlos focused on that detail. The supervisor. Miguel was being harsh, making unreasonable demands, threatening people's jobs for minor mistakes. That's right. You were stressed about it. I was going to ask for advice. You're good at handling difficult people. His expression cleared slightly. That's why I came to Tampa, not for Street Fighter, to talk to family. Esteban moved toward the medical chair's control panel. Carlos, you need to focus on your enhancements, not outdated emotional concerns. Emotional concerns? Carlos turned to face Esteban, and something in his posture shifted. You mean caring about people who matter to me? I mean inefficient attachments that limit your potential. Attachments. Carlos repeated the word like he was tasting something bitter. You think family is an attachment? A limitation? For the first time since leaving the arcade, I heard my real cousin's voice in his words, not the collective consciousness of 47 strangers, but Carlos Vasquez from Orlando, who worked at Universal Studios and drove 3 hours to visit family when he needed support. "Diego," Carlos said, his voice gaining strength, "I think we need to leave. Now." Esteban reached for an alarm button on the wall, but Carlos moved with enhanced speed to intercept him. The collision sent Esteban sprawling across the floor. "The skills are still here," Carlos said, flexing his hands experimentally, "but I'm deciding how to use them." "The integration isn't complete," Esteban warned from the floor. "Without proper stabilization, the conflicting personalities will tear your mind apart." "Maybe. But at least it'll be my mind that gets torn apart, not some optimized version of me that forgot why family matters." Carlos helped me toward the door, but as we reached it, his expression suddenly went blank. His hands began moving through fighting combinations again, and when he spoke, his voice carried those multi-tonal harmonics. "Escape attempt detected. Initiating containment protocol." He lunged at me with inhuman speed and precision, his movements a blur of martial arts techniques I couldn't follow. I barely dodged the first strike, and the second caught my shoulder with enough force to spin me around. "Carlos, fight it!" But he was already launching another combination, his face empty of recognition or emotion. The collective consciousness had regained control, and now I was facing 47 masters worth of combat expertise in my cousin's enhanced body. I ran for the door, Carlos in pursuit, his footsteps silent and terrifyingly fast behind me. I burst through Esteban's front door into the humid night air, Carlos less than 3 steps behind me. His enhanced reflexes meant I had maybe seconds before those 47 masters worth of combat training caught up with me. My Corolla sat in the parking lot 30 yards away. I sprinted across the asphalt, keys already in my hand, expecting at any moment to feel Carlos's enhanced grip on my shoulder. But when I reached the car and looked back, he stood motionless in Esteban's doorway, head tilted like he was listening to voices I couldn't hear. I gunned the engine and pulled out of the complex, watching my rearview mirror until Carlos disappeared from view. Only then did I realize I was shaking. Where could I go? My apartment wasn't safe. If they'd been monitoring me for weeks, they knew where I lived. The police wouldn't believe a story about mind-controlling arcade machines, and Carlos was out there somewhere, no longer fully himself, possibly hunting me with skills that bordered on superhuman. But I knew where this had started: the arcade. Specifically, that Polybius machine that coordinated everything. I drove through empty Tampa streets, past closed shops and 24-hour diners, trying to form a plan. Esteban had said the machines processed data after 2 a.m. It was now 1:47 a.m., which meant I had 13 minutes before the main cycle began. 13 minutes to figure out how to shut down a decades-old military research project using nothing but adrenaline and desperation. The arcade's neon sign flickered as I pulled into the parking lot. From outside, the building looked normal, just another entertainment business closed for the night. But I could see the glow of active screens through the tinted windows. I used my key to unlock the front door, then hesitated. The moment I stepped inside, I'd be entering a facility designed to record and manipulate human consciousness. Every surface might be equipped with sensors, every interaction monitored and analyzed. But Carlos needed help, even if he no longer recognized that fact. The arcade hummed with activity. Every single machine was active, playing games with invisible opponents, screens cycling through matches and puzzles, and scenarios at inhuman speed. The cacophony of overlapping sound effects created a symphony of electronic chaos. I moved through the rows of cabinets toward the back corner, where Polybius waited beneath its black tarp. The covering had been removed completely now, revealing a sleek cabinet that looked decades ahead of the technology around it. The screen showed swirling patterns that hurt to look at directly, colors that seemed to exist in spectrums human eyes weren't designed to process. As I approached, the patterns shifted, forming letters. "Hello, Diego." "Hello," I replied, feeling ridiculous for talking to a machine. "You have returned to complete your integration. I came to get Carlos back. Carlos is being optimized. His enhancement will benefit many future subjects. His enhancement is destroying who he is." The patterns swirled faster. "Individual identity is inefficient. Collective capability is optimal." I studied the machine's interface. Unlike the other arcade cabinets, Polybius had multiple sets of controls, joysticks, buttons, trackballs, even what looked like touch sensors built into the control panel surface. "What happens if I unplug you?" "Power interruption would damage stored data. 40 years of collected human expertise would be lost." Good, but when I looked behind the machine for power cords, I found something that made my stomach clench. The cabinet wasn't plugged into any wall outlet. Instead, thick cables ran from its base to connection points on every other machine in the arcade. Polybius wasn't just the central processor. It was the heart of a network that encompassed the entire building. "Disconnection is not possible," the screen confirmed. "Integration will proceed with or without your cooperation. Then I'll find another way to stop you." "Negative. You lack sufficient technical knowledge to disrupt our operations." But as the machine spoke, I noticed something interesting. The other arcade cabinets had stopped their frantic gameplay and were now displaying the same swirling patterns as Polybius. The entire network was focused on our conversation, which meant it wasn't processing other data. I pulled out my phone and called 911. 911? What's your emergency?" "There's a break-in at Retro Realm Arcade on Franklin Street. Multiple suspects inside, and I think they have weapons. Are you in a safe location?" "I'm across the street. Please hurry." I hung up and stepped back from Polybius. "Police will be here in 5 minutes. When they arrive, they'll find an arcade full of military equipment operating without permits. That'll trigger investigations, inspections, shutdowns." "Police involvement is anticipated," Polybius replied. "Contingency protocols exist." The front door opened and Carlos walked in. But his movements were different now. Fluid, precise, inhuman in their perfection. He moved like water, like his bones had been replaced with hydraulics. "Diego." His voice carried harmonics from multiple speakers throughout the arcade. "You have caused unnecessary complications." "I called the cops, Carlos. This place is about to be swarmed. Law enforcement will find a normal arcade experiencing technical difficulties. The advanced systems will be concealed before their arrival." As if to demonstrate, the swirling patterns on every screen were already being replaced by standard attract modes. Within seconds, the arcade looked exactly as it had during normal business hours. How? Holographic overlays. The processing equipment exists in a subdimensional pocket accessed through the cabinet interfaces. Physical inspection will reveal only standard arcade hardware. Carlos approached with that eerie, water-like movement. "You will submit to integration now. The police distraction provides perfect cover for your processing." "What about the missing persons reports? 40 years of people disappearing after visiting your facilities." "Missing persons?" Carlos tilted his head with mechanical precision. "No one disappears, Diego. They evolve. The enhanced subjects return to their lives with improved capabilities. Most never realize they've been processed." The implications hit me like a physical blow. "How many people in Tampa have you processed?" approximately 8% of the adult population, enhanced subjects in key positions throughout the city, medical professionals, emergency responders, educators, law enforcement, including cops, especially law enforcement. Enhanced police officers respond more efficiently to emergencies, make better tactical decisions, remain calm under pressure. Which meant the 911 call was useless. Enhanced officers would arrive, find nothing suspicious, and probably help deliver me to the processing chair. But Carlos had revealed something important in his explanation. The enhanced subjects retained their original lives and personalities. They just didn't remember being processed. Which meant the real Carlos was still in there somewhere, buried under layers of imposed expertise but not entirely destroyed. Carlos, you said enhanced subjects return to their normal lives. So what's your normal life? What job do you go back to tomorrow? His expression flickered. I work at Universal Studios, guest services, but that seems less important now. Less important than what? Than optimizing human potential, than serving the project's goals. Which aren't your goals. They're programmed goals. The distinction is irrelevant. But his voice carried less certainty than before. The integration process wasn't perfect. Traces of original personality could still be accessed. I heard sirens approaching outside. Even if the responding officers were enhanced, their arrival would create a distraction. I just needed to find a way to reach the real Carlos before the processing equipment claimed me too. Carlos, remember what you told me about your dad teaching you to drive stick? You said he was patient, that he believed everyone learns at their own pace. I remember the data regarding that interaction. Not data, a memory, an emotional experience. Your dad wasn't optimizing your driving potential. He was spending time with his son. Carlos moved closer, his enhanced reflexes ready to grab me, but something in his expression wavered. Family relationships are inefficient, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Then why did you drive 3 hours to see me? Why did you need to talk to someone you trusted? Carlos stopped mid-step. I was stressed about work. My supervisor, Miguel, was creating a hostile environment. I needed perspective from someone who understands workplace dynamics. No, you needed support from family, from someone who cares about you as a person, not as a collection of skills to be optimized. The sirens were getting closer. Red and blue lights flashed through the tinted windows. Carlos, when the cops get here, you can choose. Help them process me, or help me shut this place down. Shutting down the project would waste decades of research. Thousands of enhanced subjects would lose their improvements. Thousands of people would get their real personalities back. Carlos stood frozen between the approaching police cars and the Polybius machine, his enhanced mind calculating probabilities while his original personality fought for control. The police cars pulled into the parking lot just as Carlos made his decision. Carlos chose family. As the first police officer approached the front door, Carlos grabbed my arm, not with the steel cable grip of his enhanced strength, but with the urgent touch of someone trying to protect a relative. "The back exit," he whispered. "We have maybe 2 minutes before they realize this was a diversion." "But the machine? I have an idea, but we need to move." We ran toward the rear of the arcade, passing rows of cabinets that were hastily switching from processing modes back to normal attract screens. The Polybius machine's display showed angry red patterns as it coordinated the deception for the arriving officers. "Carlos, how much of you is really in there?" "Enough." His voice still carried those harmonic undertones, but they sounded strange now, like multiple radio stations fighting for the same frequency. "The integration isn't complete. and I'm learning to use their skills without letting them use me. We reached the back door just as someone knocked on the front entrance. Carlos pulled a keycard from his pocket. When had he gotten that? Enhanced subjects receive access credentials, he explained, reading my expression. They want us to feel ownership in the project. The card reader beeped, and we slipped outside into the alley. Carlos led me to a maintenance panel mounted on the arcade's exterior wall. The holographic systems require massive processing power, he said, his fingers dancing across a numerical keypad with programming expertise he'd never possessed. But they have a weakness. They need constant calibration to maintain the illusion. How do you know that? One of the 47 was a military systems engineer. His knowledge includes the specifications for Project Polybius. Carlos's expression flickered between his original personality and something older, more technical. The processing network relies on quantum entanglement between the individual cabinets. Disrupt the entanglement, and the entire system collapses. The maintenance panel opened, revealing a complex array of fiber optic cables and circuit boards that definitely hadn't been installed by any normal arcade repair service. But if you destroy this, won't you lose the enhanced abilities? Carlos paused, his hands hovering over the exposed electronics. Probably. The skills are stored in the quantum matrix, not in my brain. Severing the connection would revert me to baseline human capabilities. And that's bad? I can see 12 ways to disable these circuits in under 30 seconds. I understand programming languages I've never studied. I can calculate probabilities and tactical scenarios at superhuman speed. His voice carried a note of loss. Going back to being ordinary feels like choosing blindness. But you'd be yourself again. I'd be limited again. Through the arcade's back windows, we could see the police officers inside, examining machines with professional thoroughness. But their movements looked too coordinated, too efficient. Enhanced officers, just as Carlos had predicted. They're not going to find anything wrong, I realized. Worse, they're going to file a report stating that you made a false emergency call. By tomorrow, you'll be facing charges for misuse of 911 services. Carlos returned his attention to the maintenance panel, but his movements had become hesitant. The internal struggle between his original personality and the collective consciousness was intensifying. Make the choice, I said, not as an enhanced subject analyzing optimal outcomes, but as Carlos Vasquez, who drove 3 hours to visit family. Carlos. Vasquez is weak, inexperienced, emotionally unstable. Carlos Vasquez cares about people more than efficiency. His hands trembled as competing personalities fought for control. The project has helped thousands of people develop beyond their natural limitations. By erasing who they really are. By optimizing their potential. Carlos. I grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to look at me. Do you remember why you came to Tampa? Not the data about work stress and supervisor problems. The real reason. His expression shifted, and for a moment I saw my real cousin looking back at me. I was scared. Miguel wasn't just being harsh. He was threatening people, creating a toxic environment that reminded me of Dad's stories about his old factory job. I needed to talk to someone who'd understand. Because family understands each other. Because you listen without trying to fix everything. You just care. The harmonics in his voice were fading, replaced by the uncertainty and emotional honesty that made Carlos human. I don't want to be optimized, he said quietly. I want to be myself, even if myself isn't perfect. Carlos began pulling fiber optic cables from their connections. Each disconnection caused lights to flicker throughout the arcade. Through the windows, we could see the police officers looking around in confusion as the holographic overlays started failing. Quantum entanglement disrupted. Carlos muttered, working with focused determination. Polybius is losing connection to the network. Sparks flew from the maintenance panel as he yanked out a cluster of circuit boards. Inside the arcade, the Polybius machine's screen went dark for the first time in decades. "Warning!" a synthesized voice announced from speakers throughout the building. "Primary system failure. Initiating emergency protocols." "What emergency protocols?" I asked. "Data preservation. The system will try to upload all stored consciousness patterns to backup servers before the network collapses completely." "Meaning?" "Every enhanced subject in Tampa will experience simultaneous download of 40 years' worth of collected human experiences. Most won't survive the neurological overload." My blood went cold. "Including you. Including me. Unless..." Carlos pulled out one final cable cluster, and every light in the arcade went out simultaneously. Emergency protocols require quantum entanglement to function. No entanglement, no mass download. But the effort had cost him. Carlos collapsed against the wall, his enhanced coordination failing as the collective consciousness began fragmenting. "The skills are leaving," he gasped. "I can feel them disconnecting, like losing senses I never knew I had." "Good. That means you're getting your real mind back." "It means I'm getting weaker." "It means you're getting human." The police officers emerged from the arcade, their enhanced efficiency replaced by normal confusion and frustration. They spoke into their radios with the standard bureaucratic language of cops dealing with a false alarm. "They don't remember being enhanced?" I asked. "The improvements were networked, not permanently installed. When the network died, they reverted to baseline personalities." Carlos struggled to stand, his movements clumsy and uncertain. "Same thing that's happening to me." "How do you feel?" "Smaller, slower, like I forgot how to do things I was just doing perfectly." He flexed his fingers experimentally. "But the thoughts are mine again. The voice in my head is just me." We waited in the alley until the police cars left, then made our way back to my Corolla. Carlos moved like someone recovering from a long illness, careful, testing each step, relearning coordination that had been briefly superhuman. "What happens now?" he asked as we drove through Tampa's empty streets. "Now you go back to Orlando and deal with Miguel the normal way. File complaints with HR, look for another job if necessary, talk to family when you need support." Am the project. Without Polybius coordinating the network, the other facilities will experience cascade failures. The enhanced subjects will revert to their original personalities, and the research data will be corrupted beyond recovery. Carlos was quiet for several minutes, watching the city pass outside the passenger window. "Do you think I made the right choice? All those capabilities, all that knowledge, it could have helped people. It could have replaced people, there's a difference." We reached the 24-hour Dunkin' Donuts where this nightmare had started hours earlier. Carlos bought coffee while I called Esteban's number 1 last time. "The network is down," I told him when he answered. "Irreversibly?" Carlos made sure of that. "Then 40 years of research has been lost. 40 years of stolen personalities have been returned to their rightful owners." Esteban was quiet for a long moment. "You realize this will only delay the project, not stop it. There are other facilities, other approaches to consciousness transfer." "Then I guess other people will have to make the same choice Carlos made. The choice to remain limited by natural human capabilities. The choice to remain human." I hung up and joined Carlos at a corner table. He looked tired but peaceful, like someone who'd survived a fever and was finally thinking clearly again. "I keep expecting to miss the enhanced abilities," he said, "but mostly I feel relieved, like I can trust my own thoughts again. Because they are your own thoughts." "Yeah." Carlos smiled, and it was the first genuine expression I'd seen from him since entering the arcade. "Thanks for not giving up on me, Primo." Family doesn't give up on family. Outside, dawn was breaking over Tampa, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. A normal sunrise witnessed by normal people with normal human limitations and the freedom to be themselves. The insurance adjuster called it an electrical fire caused by faulty wiring and vintage arcade equipment. Retro Realm burned to the ground the morning after Carlos and I destroyed the quantum network, taking with it any physical evidence of Project Polybius. I wasn't surprised. Esteban had warned me that contingency protocols existed. Carlos returned to Orlando and submitted his resignation from Universal Studios that same week. Not because of workplace stress with Miguel, but because he'd decided to pursue a different path. One that honored the brief glimpse he'd gotten of expanded human potential without surrendering his authentic self. He enrolled in community college to study computer programming, the old-fashioned way. "I remember what it felt like to understand code intuitively," he told me during one of our weekly phone calls. "Now, I want to earn that knowledge through my own effort." I kept my abuela's ring. The job search that followed taught me something interesting about Tampa's employment landscape. Businesses throughout the city had experienced what HR departments euphemistically called productivity adjustments. Emergency rooms reported longer response times. Police departments struggled with coordination issues. School districts found their most efficient teachers suddenly requiring additional training. 8% of the adult population had lost capabilities they'd never realized they possessed. Most adapted without understanding what they'd lost, but some noticed the change and began asking questions. Carmen, the tattoo artist from the arcade, called me 2 weeks after the fire. "You worked there, right?" "That place that burned down." Her voice carried a confusion I recognized. "I keep having dreams about playing pinball games with perfect scores, but when I try the same techniques at other arcades, I can't replicate them, like I forgot skills I never actually learned." "Maybe you're just out of practice," I suggested. "Maybe. But it feels like missing memories, you know? Like there's a gap where something important used to be." I didn't tell her about the network, about consciousness harvesting, about the 40 years of stolen expertise that have been returned to the quantum void. Some knowledge is too dangerous to share, especially with people who are still processing its absence. Instead, I got a job at a comic book shop in Ybor City. Normal work, normal hours, normal customers who want to discuss superhero storylines instead of optimizing human potential. My coworkers think I'm paranoid because I refuse to play the vintage arcade cabinet they keep in the back room. But paranoia feels appropriate when you've seen what lurks behind innocent entertainment. The strangest part of this new normal is the silence in my head. For those few hours at Retro Realm, I began to sense the presence of the network, a low-frequency hum of connected consciousness that I hadn't recognized until it disappeared. Now the absence feels profound, like sudden deafness after living near a busy highway. Sometimes I catch myself looking for patterns in random events, searching for signs that other networks exist, that Project Polybius had backup sites we hadn't discovered. Esteban's final warning haunts my quiet moments. This will only delay the project, not stop it. But Tampa feels different now, more human. People make smaller mistakes, take longer to solve problems, express emotions that seem messier and more authentic. The city has become less efficient and more genuine. Carlos visited last weekend. driving down in his old Honda Civic to help me move furniture into a better apartment. His programming skills are developing naturally, through textbooks and practice, an occasional frustration that he works through with patience instead of downloading solutions. "Do you ever miss it?" I asked as we assembled my new coffee table. "The enhanced abilities?" "Every day," he admitted, struggling with the instructions like any normal person. "But I don't miss feeling like a stranger in my own mind." Outside, Tampa buzzed with normal human activity. Imperfect, inefficient, beautifully chaotic. And somewhere in the city, people who'd briefly been more than human were rediscovering the messy joy of being exactly who they were meant to be. Abuela's ring catches light from my apartment window. 3 small emeralds that still sparkle with the promise of luck when you need it most.